Have you ever had a moment where everything you thought you knew just crumbled? Where your entire world was shattered in an instant, and you realized the truth was something you never could have imagined? That's exactly what happened to me. One moment, I was living what I thought was a perfect life. The next, everything I believed in came crashing down. It was like being punched in the gut. And the worst part? I didn't see it coming. I had trusted her. I loved her with everything I had. She was my partner, my best friend. I thought we were unbreakable, that we had something special, something real. But everything changed the moment I found out the truth. The moment I discovered what she had been hiding from me all this time. I always thought I knew my wife better than anyone. I thought I could read her like an open book. But what I found, what I uncovered, turned my world upside down. It was like the life I had been living was a lie. And the worst part? The person I trusted most in this world, the one I thought would never betray me, was the one who shattered it all. The discovery? It was so much worse than I could ever have imagined. And even now, it feels unreal. But trust me when I say this. The truth is darker than anything I could have dreamed up. Stay with me. This story is not for the faint of heart. What I'm about to tell you isn't just about betrayal. It's about the kind of heartbreak that changes you forever. And I'm going to walk you through it all. The pain, the shock, the disbelief. Because you need to hear this. You need to understand the raw reality of what happens when trust is completely destroyed. It's a journey I never wanted to take, but I'm here now, and it's time to share what I've learned. Buckle up, because you won't believe where this story goes. At the time, everything seemed perfect. I mean, we were a team, people saw us and thought we had it all. We laughed together, we dreamed together, we built a life together. There were these moments, little pockets of time, where it felt like nothing could tear us apart. I remember the weekends we'd spend just driving around, getting lost in new places, laughing about the silliest things. It was easy. It was natural. I thought we were invincible. She was my best friend, the one person I thought I could turn to for anything, no matter what. There was a sense of comfort in knowing I had her by my side, and I thought that kind of bond was something no one could break. I believed with every part of me that we had something real, something solid. I trusted her with everything I had, my heart, my secrets, my future. She was the center of my world, and I thought nothing could ever shake that. But here's the thing, I never saw it coming. I never saw how easily everything could fall apart. I was blind to the truth that was staring me in the face. You know that feeling when you're in a relationship and everything feels so perfect? You get this sense that you're untouchable, that nothing could ever go wrong because you've built this flawless little bubble around you. That was me. That was us. But what I didn't know, what I couldn't have possibly known, was that this perfect life, this perfect love we had, was just a facade, a carefully constructed illusion. Looking back, I realize how many little things I missed. The signs were there, small at first, almost imperceptible. Little inconsistencies in her stories, odd late nights at work, unexplained phone calls she'd quickly end when I walked in the room. But at the time, I brushed it off. I told myself it was nothing. I was so convinced that we were fine, that nothing could break us. How could I have been so blind? I should have known better. I should have trusted my instincts, but I was so wrapped up in the idea of what we had. I ignored all the red flags. I thought love was enough. I thought loyalty was something unbreakable. But all along, she had been hiding something from me, something that would change everything. I'll never forget that one night when I looked at her and thought, everything is perfect. Nothing will ever come between us. But what I didn't know, what I had no idea was happening behind my back, was that this perfect life was a lie. A lie that I would soon uncover in the most painful way imaginable. At first, it was subtle, almost unnoticeable. Small things, little cracks in the perfect image I had of our life together. And I kept telling myself, It's nothing. You're overthinking it. But the problem with ignoring your gut is that it doesn't stop speaking. It only gets louder. And one day, I couldn't ignore it anymore. It started with the late nights at work. I remember the first time she came home later than usual, her excuse being a meeting that ran long. I believed her. Of course I did. It made sense at the time. She had a demanding job, and I was proud of her for how hard she worked. But then it became a pattern. Night after night, she'd be working late, sometimes not getting home until after midnight. I started to notice how she'd act when she walked through the door, rushed, almost distant. She'd throw me a quick smile, but it never reached her eyes. And in the back of my mind, I started asking myself questions I didn't want to answer. Then came the absences. It wasn't just the late nights anymore. It was the sudden disappearances. A Saturday afternoon would pass, and she'd be out running errands. But when I called to check in, her phone would be busy or go straight to voicemail. When she'd come back hours later, there was always a vague excuse. I ran into some friends or I lost track of time. At first, I told myself it was just one of those things. Life happens. But then the absences started to pile up, one after another. And that little voice inside me started to speak louder. And then there were the texts. I'll never forget the first time I saw her phone screen light up while we were sitting together on the couch. I didn't mean to look. She was just scrolling through her messages while I was finishing dinner, but something caught my eye. The name on the screen was unfamiliar, and for a brief moment, I froze. She quickly glanced at her phone, saw my eyes on it, and without saying a word, swiped the message away, locking the screen. My heart raced, and in that split second, I knew something wasn't right. I tried to shake it off. Maybe it's nothing, I thought. But when I looked at her face, I saw a flash of something. Fear? Guilt? It was gone in a blink, but I saw it. And that's when the doubts really started creeping in. I didn't want to believe it. I didn't want to believe that the woman I loved, the one I trusted above all others, could be hiding something from me. But every time I looked at her, that nagging feeling in the pit of my stomach grew stronger. The more I tried to ignore it, the harder it became to shake. It wasn't just a phone, it was the little things, her sudden need for privacy, the way she would become defensive if I asked too many questions. I could sense a wall building between us, and it was like she was pulling away, little by little, each day. But every time I tried to talk to her about it, she'd assure me that everything was fine. "You're just being paranoid," she'd say, with that smile that used to put me at ease. But deep down, I couldn't ignore that voice inside telling me something was wrong. Something was off. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to trust her so badly. But with every new red flag, every small inconsistency, the truth was becoming harder to ignore. And it hit me, maybe I was in denial, but I couldn't pretend anymore. The doubts were building, and I was starting to see the cracks in the life we'd built together. It was only a matter of time before those cracks would break wide open. The doubt had been eating at me for weeks, slowly, relentlessly, until I couldn't ignore it any longer. I'd been pretending everything was fine, convincing myself that maybe I was just overthinking things. But deep down, something inside me knew the truth. And one night, I couldn't take it anymore. I had to know for sure. It started innocently enough. She had left her phone on the kitchen counter, unlocked, and for some reason, that night I felt like I had to look. I tried to push the thought away, to ignore the voice in my head that kept saying, What if? What if this is it? But I couldn't stop myself. My hands were shaking as I picked up her phone, glancing around to make sure she wasn't anywhere nearby. I didn't know what I was looking for, but I knew, deep down, that I had to find something. I had to see for myself if the suspicions that had been gnawing at me were real. At first, I scrolled through her messages, heart pounding in my chest. Everything seemed normal. Just everyday chats with friends, her family, nothing out of the ordinary. I told myself, see, there's nothing here. You're just paranoid. But the more I scrolled, the more I felt that weight pressing down on me. Then I came across something strange, an unknown number. I stared at it for a long moment, confused, my finger hovering over the message. I didn't want to open it. I didn't want to find what I thought was there. But I couldn't stop myself. My thumb slid across the screen, and when I opened the conversation, my stomach dropped. It was a thread full of late-night texts I had never seen before. Messages between her and someone I didn't recognize, a name I'd never heard of. The words hit me like a ton of bricks. It wasn't just small talk. It wasn't just an innocent friendship. These messages were intimate, filled with flirtation, inside jokes, and things she had never shared with me. As I read further, my heart sank even lower. There were late-night calls, long conversations that stretched into the early hours of the morning, while I was sleeping completely unaware. There were moments shared that I couldn't even imagine, moments she had kept hidden from me, from the life we had built together. One message stood out among the rest. It was a message from him saying, "I can't wait to see you tonight. I miss you more than you know." My hands were shaking as I read those words over and over, unable to believe what I was seeing. I felt like the ground was crumbling beneath me. And then it all clicked. Everything, the late nights, the absences, the little things I had dismissed as nothing, suddenly made sense. The person I thought I knew better than anyone, the woman I had loved with all my heart, had been hiding something so much bigger than I could have imagined. This wasn't just a casual fling. This was an affair she had been having behind my back for who knows how long. I felt sick to my stomach. I wanted to scream, to throw the phone across the room, to wake her up and demand answers. But I couldn't move. My mind was spinning, my body frozen in place as the weight of the truth crashed down on me. The betrayal was so deep, so raw, that I couldn't even process it fully at first. All I could do was stare at that phone, the messages staring back at me, mocking me for how blind I had been. I had never been more certain of anything in my life. The truth was right there in front of me. She had been lying to me, deceiving me, and I had been too trusting, too naive to see it. All those little things I'd brushed off, they were pieces of a puzzle that had finally come together. And now I had no choice but to face it. The truth was undeniable, and it was going to change everything. The moment I saw those messages, everything inside me froze. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. My world tilted on its axis, and all I could focus on was the truth, the painful, undeniable truth, staring me right in the face. But there was one thing left to do. One thing I had to get from her, the truth. I couldn't leave it hanging in the air. I had to know if what I had seen was real. I waited for her to get home that evening, the silence in the house thick with tension. The air felt heavy, like something was about to break. Every minute felt like an hour, and my mind raced. What was I going to say? How was I going to confront her? I had never imagined that I'd be in this position, but here I was, standing on the edge of a cliff, and I could either jump or turn away. But there was no turning back now. When she walked through the door, I could tell something was off. She was late again, of course, but this time, it didn't matter. I was past the point of pretending everything was okay. The minute she stepped into the kitchen, I knew I couldn't wait any longer. I couldn't keep pretending I didn't know. I turned to face her, my voice steady but heavy with the weight of everything I'd just uncovered. "We need to talk," I said, my words sharp in the stillness. She looked at me, startled, and a nervous smile tugged at the corners of her lips. "About what?" she asked, her voice a little too casual, a little too defensive. I didn't waste any time. "About the messages. The late-night calls. About him." The words came out all at once, like a punch to the gut. "Who is he?" Her face went pale. For a moment, I could see the shock in her eyes, the same shock I felt, but it wasn't the shock of being caught. It was the panic of someone who had been living a lie and had just been exposed. She took a step back, her hand instinctively reaching for the counter as if she needed something to steady herself. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said quickly, too quickly. I could hear the shakiness in her voice, the uncertainty that slipped through her words. But there was still that veneer of control, that calmness, as if she thought she could talk her way out of it. I couldn't believe it. She was denying it. She was standing there, looking me in the eye, and denying everything. After everything I had seen, after all the proof sitting right in front of me, she was still playing this game. It was almost like a slap in the face, like she thought I was stupid enough to fall for it. "You're lying," I said, my voice barely containing the anger building inside me. "You've been lying to me for months, and now you're going to stand here and pretend like I'm imagining this." She opened her mouth to speak again, but no words came out. Her eyes darted around the room, like she was searching for an escape, for something, anything, to hold on to. But there was no way out. She was cornered, and she knew it. I could see it in her eyes. The guilt, the fear. It was all there, hiding beneath her calm facade. But she didn't crack. Instead, she tried to deflect. "You're overthinking this," she said, trying to sound reassuring, but it was clear her nerves were getting the best of her. "You're imagining things, you know that, right? It's nothing. You're just being paranoid. I love you. There's no one else." And in that moment, for a split second, I almost believed her. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that I was just overreacting, that this was all a misunderstanding. I wanted to go back to the life I had before all of this, before the doubt, before the pain. But the truth was already there, hanging between us like a dark cloud, and no matter how much she tried to deny it, I couldn't ignore what I knew in my heart. Her words were so convincing. She said all the right things, the things I wanted to hear, but they didn't matter anymore. The truth had already been uncovered, and nothing she said could change it. I saw the messages. I said quietly, my voice barely above a whisper, "I know everything, and I need you to tell me the truth, because I can't keep living in this lie." For a moment, she didn't say anything. She just stood there, her eyes shifting as if she was weighing whether to come clean or keep lying. Then, finally she spoke, her voice small, defeated. "I'm sorry. I never meant for you to find out like this." And just like that, everything I thought I knew about her, about us, crumbled. I couldn't let it go, not after everything I had uncovered. I had confronted her, but her lies were still there, hanging in the air, just as thick and suffocating as ever. It wasn't enough. The words, the empty promises, they all felt like a veil she was trying to pull over my eyes, but I couldn't unsee what I had already seen. The truth was there, and I wasn't about to let her keep lying to me. I had to know for sure. I needed the confirmation, the undeniable proof that would end this once and for all. I couldn't live in this limbo anymore. Too many unanswered questions, too many pieces of the puzzle still missing. So, one evening, when she left the house just like she always did, casually like nothing was wrong, I decided I wasn't going to sit by anymore. I waited for her to drive off, then grabbed my keys and stepped out into the night. The darkness of the evening seemed to mirror the chaos swirling inside me. My hands were sweating, my heart pounding in my chest as I silently followed her car, keeping a safe distance behind. It felt wrong, sneaky, like I was betraying her trust all over again, but I had no choice. I had to see it for myself. I had to know where she was going, who she was meeting. As we drove through the city, the tension in the car grew unbearable. I tried to steady my breathing, but it was like the air had thickened around me. I was so close to the truth now. Every street she turned down, every light she passed, my gut twisted more. This wasn't just about finding out where she was going anymore. This was about seeing her for who she really was, and I wasn't ready for what I was about to witness. She stopped at a small, nondescript bar just outside the city, tucked away on a quiet corner. I parked a block away, watching from behind the cover of a dark alley, barely able to catch my breath. My mind raced. I knew she didn't tell me she was going out tonight. She said she'd be meeting a friend from work. Just another excuse, another lie. And now, as I sat there in the cold, watching her walk toward the door of the bar, I felt my stomach drop. She wasn't alone. I had told myself 100 times that maybe I was wrong, that maybe she just needed space, that maybe all of this was just in my head. But I wasn't wrong. I was right. My heart pounded in my chest as I watched her laugh with a man I didn't recognize. He wasn't a friend from work, and he wasn't a casual acquaintance. There was something intimate about the way they spoke to each other, something undeniably familiar in the way they smiled. It was the kind of smile that should have been saved for me, the kind that should have been reserved for our private moments. They walked into the bar together, their arms brushing casually against each other, and I felt the ground slip from beneath me. Every step they took inside that building, every gesture, every shared glance only confirmed what I'd been too afraid to admit. She wasn't where she said she was. She wasn't just meeting a friend. She was meeting him, the man I had no idea existed, the man who had somehow wormed his way into our life, into her heart. I could feel my hands trembling on the steering wheel, my grip tightening as I tried to steady myself. Every rational part of my mind screamed to leave, to drive away, and pretend I hadn't seen any of it. But I couldn't move. I couldn't tear myself away from the truth unfolding right in front of me. For what felt like hours, I sat there, unable to look away. They didn't even notice me watching them. I was a ghost in the shadows, invisible and powerless, but witnessing everything. They laughed, talked, and shared a quiet moment that I could never be a part of. My wife, the woman I trusted more than anyone, was with someone else, someone who wasn't me. Someone who had been in her life long enough to make her smile like that, to make her forget the life we had built. It was too much to process. The betrayal, the crushing weight of it, all of it hit me like a tidal wave, drowning me in pain, anger, and disbelief. I had known something was wrong, but this was the truth I had been afraid to face. When they finally left, hours later, I didn't follow them. I couldn't. I was too broken, too devastated by what I had just witnessed. But I knew one thing for sure now. The lies were no longer hidden. The man she had been seeing wasn't some fleeting fling. He was real. And now, I had seen him. I had seen everything. The truth couldn't be ignored any longer. I couldn't stop thinking about what I'd seen. The way they looked at each other, the casualness of it all. Their ease, the comfort. The way she laughed at his jokes like she never did with me. I couldn't get the image out of my mind. It gnawed at me, deep down, leaving me restless, on edge, desperate for answers. And that's when I decided I wasn't done. I had to know more. It wasn't just about the man I'd seen her with anymore. No, this had become something bigger, something more. It was about her. It was about us. The life we'd shared. The love I had believed in. It was all being ripped apart, piece by piece, and I couldn't just sit there and let it happen. I needed to understand what I had missed, what I hadn't seen, and the only way to do that was to dig deeper. One evening, when she was out, likely doing the same thing she had been doing for God knows how long, I found myself standing in the living room, staring at her phone. It was sitting on a coffee table just like before, unlocked, waiting. But this time, I wasn't just casually glancing. This time, I was determined. My hands were clammy, my heart racing in my chest, but I didn't care. I had to know what she had been hiding. I picked it up, my pulse thundering in my ears. My fingers hesitated for only a moment before I unlocked it and dove into her messages. Every fiber of my being screamed at me to stop, told me I wasn't prepared for what I might find. But I ignored it. I couldn't live with the doubt anymore. I had to know everything. At first, it was the usual random texts with friends, work updates, messages that meant nothing to me. But then I started noticing things. Strange things. Names I didn't recognize. And then the messages themselves, hundreds of them. I scrolled, my stomach twisting with every new text, every new conversation. It was like pulling back the layers of a story I wasn't supposed to know, a story I had never been meant to hear. The first message that caught my eye was innocuous enough at first glance. Just a "hey, what's up?" But then I kept reading, and my eyes widened. The tone was flirty, way too flirty for two people who were just friends. My stomach dropped as I realized that this wasn't just some innocent conversation. This was something much deeper, much darker. They were sharing private jokes, memories that I had never been a part of, moments that should have belonged to me. They spoke about each other like they were more than just casual acquaintances, like they were already close, closer than I ever was with her. I couldn't stop reading. I couldn't tear my eyes away from the screen. The messages kept coming, one after another. Late-night texts that sent a chill down my spine. Sweet nothings whispered back and forth between them. Words I never imagined my wife would say to anyone but me. Each message made my heart sink deeper and deeper, until I thought it might just stop beating altogether. Then I came across something that made my blood run cold. A message from him, dated just a few weeks ago, that read, "I miss you so much. I can't wait to see you again. You make me feel alive." I froze, my breath catching in my throat. I read it again, and again. My mind raced. Had she been seeing him for months? For longer? How long had this affair been going on behind my back? How many times had I brushed off my suspicions, telling myself I was just paranoid? The worst part wasn't just the affair itself. It was the lies. The way she had hid all of it from me, pretending nothing was wrong, pretending we were still the happy couple we once were. It was the way she had smiled at me, kissed me, acted like everything was fine, all while secretly messaging him, planning their next meeting, sharing their intimate thoughts. It was like she was living two lives, one with me and one with him, and I was nothing more than an afterthought in hers. But it didn't stop there. As I continued to scroll, I found more, so many more, texts that were more intimate than I could stomach. They talked about the future, about things they wanted to do together, places they wanted to go. They planned weekends away, sneaked around behind my back like it was all some kind of game. And through it all, I was oblivious. I had been so blind. The messages were like a gut punch, one after another, until I couldn't take it anymore. I dropped the phone onto the table, my hands shaking uncontrollably. My head spun, my vision blurred. I had to step away. I had to get out of that room. I couldn't breathe in that space anymore. The truth was too much, too raw. I knew now, beyond any doubt, that everything had been a lie. My marriage, my trust, the woman I thought I knew, it had all been shattered in an instant. And I was left holding the pieces, wondering how I could ever put them back together. It was inevitable. I had reached the point where there was no going back. The lies had built up so high, so thick, that there was nothing left to hold them up anymore. And I knew, deep down, I couldn't let this continue. I had already seen everything I needed to see. I had the evidence, the messages, the proof of everything that had been happening behind my back. And now I had to face her one last time. I waited for her to come home that night. The silence in the house felt deafening, like a storm was about to break. I was pacing around the kitchen, my hands shaking, my mind racing, but I knew what I had to do. She was still pretending everything was fine, still going through the motions as if nothing had changed. But it had. It had all changed, and I couldn't keep pretending it hadn't. When she walked through the door, I could feel the weight of the moment hanging in the air between us. Her face, as usual, lit up with that practice smile, the one she put on when she wanted to seem like everything was okay. But I wasn't fooled. Not anymore. I wasn't the same person I was before I found out. The man who trusted her without question, who thought we had a future together. That man was gone. I motioned for her to sit down. She looked at me, puzzled but not yet suspicious. She probably thought it was just another conversation, just another chat where I'd let the cracks in our marriage slide. But this time, I wasn't going to let it slide. This time, there would be no pretending. "Sit down," I said, my voice low but firm. "We need to talk." Her smile faded, and she hesitated for a moment before sitting across from me. The tension in the room was palpable, thick enough that I could almost taste it. I didn't speak at first. I just looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time in so long, I saw her for who she really was. The woman I thought I knew, the woman I loved, was sitting there in front of me, trying to act normal, while I was drowning in the knowledge of what she had done. She shifted uncomfortably under my gaze, but still, she tried to play it cool. "What's going on?" "You're scaring me." She said it like she didn't know what I had discovered, but I could see the flicker of fear in her eyes. She knew. She had to know. I took a deep breath. The weight of everything I was about to say almost crushed me, but I didn't hesitate. I pulled my phone out of my pocket, slid it across the table, and tapped the screen to show her the messages. I didn't say anything at first. I just let her look at them. I wanted her to see what I had seen. I wanted her to feel the same cold, crushing realization that I had felt when I first uncovered the truth. I wanted her to know there was no running, no hiding anymore. She stared at the screen, her face going pale as she scrolled through the texts. I watched her closely, watched her eyes as they widened, the blood draining from her face. She tried to look away, but the evidence was undeniable. The truth was right there, staring her in the face, and she knew it. There was no more denying it. No more excuses. For a moment, the room was silent. I could hear my own breathing, ragged and heavy, as the weight of the moment settled in. She set the phone down slowly, her hands trembling, and finally, she looked at me. There was no more pretending now. No more "I'm sorry," or "it's not what you think." She knew. She knew I had seen it all. Her voice was small, barely above a whisper. "How long have you known?" she asked, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I saw you," I said, my voice breaking as I fought to keep it steady. "I followed you that night. I saw you with him. And I saw everything else. The messages, the calls, the lies." My words tumbled out, raw and jagged, like pieces of glass. "You told me it was nothing, but I wasn't stupid. I could see the truth in your eyes." She closed her eyes for a moment, as if trying to hold herself together. But when she opened them again, they were filled with a mix of guilt and shame. And then, finally, the words I had been dreading, but also expecting, came tumbling out of her mouth. "I'm sorry. I never wanted you to find out like this." She looked away, unable to meet my gaze. "But it's true. There's no way around it. I've been seeing him for months." Those words, those cold, harsh words, hit me like a punch to the stomach. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. It felt like the ground had fallen out from under me, like everything I had believed in had been ripped away in an instant. I wanted to scream, to rage against her, to demand to know why, how, and when everything had gone wrong. But I couldn't. I just sat there, stunned, numb, unable to process the pain she had caused. "I don't know what to say," she continued, her voice trembling now, barely audible. "I never meant to hurt you, but I've been selfish. I don't even know who I am anymore." I sat there, staring at her, trying to comprehend everything that had just been laid bare between us. The silence stretched on, thick and suffocating. I wanted to say something, anything, but all I could do was look at her, the woman I had loved, and wonder how it had all come to this. The truth was out there, laid bare between us like an open wound. The silence, after she confessed, was unbearable. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to lash out. But all I could do was sit there, staring at her, feeling like I was drowning in a sea of betrayal. And then she spoke again. "I'm so sorry." I didn't mean for this to happen, she said, her voice breaking. Her eyes were filled with tears, but her words were hollow, empty. I couldn't believe a single thing she said anymore. It was a mistake. I never wanted to hurt you. Please, I'll do anything to fix this. She was pleading now, her desperation flooding the room. The woman I had loved for so long was now reduced to a trembling wreck, begging for forgiveness. She was saying all the right things, the things I had wanted to hear for so long, but they meant nothing. The truth had already been exposed. There was no going back. Not anymore. But then, just when I thought the nightmare couldn't get worse, I saw it. The panic in her eyes as she glanced at her phone on the table. I knew exactly what she was thinking. She couldn't face the reality of what she'd done, not with the evidence staring us both in the face. She needed to make it disappear. In an instant, she grabbed her phone from the table and began tapping frantically. I watched her, confused at first, unsure of what was happening. Was she trying to call someone? Was she trying to explain herself to him? But as I saw her swipe the screen, I realized what she was doing. She was trying to erase everything. I froze, a cold chill running down my spine as I watched her delete the messages, the very ones that had been the foundation of my discovery. My stomach turned as I realized what she was trying to do. She wasn't just apologizing. She was covering up. She was trying to erase the proof that had shattered everything between us. The texts, the photos, the lies, all of it was vanishing before my eyes. My mind raced, the reality of what was happening hitting me like a truck. I couldn't believe it. She wasn't even trying to hide it anymore. It wasn't just about the affair anymore. It was about the desperation in her eyes, the frantic need to erase the truth, to take back what she'd done. But as I watched her scramble to delete the evidence, something inside me clicked. I wasn't about to let her get away with this. She had already destroyed everything, and now she was trying to cover it up, to make it all disappear like it had never happened. I wasn't going to let that happen. I reached for my phone from the table, my heart pounding in my chest as I opened the backup file I'd made earlier, before I had even confronted her. I'd suspected something might happen like this, some desperate last-ditch effort on her part to make everything go away. So, while she was out earlier that day, I had taken the precaution of saving all the messages to my phone, copying them, keeping the proof safe. I didn't know if I was going to need it, but I wasn't about to risk it. As I scrolled through the messages I had saved, the evidence was still there, untouched. I had her. We had her. It was like a safety net, a quiet victory in the middle of the chaos. She might have been trying to delete everything, but she didn't realize that I was one step ahead. When she looked up, seeing me scroll through the messages I had saved, her face went white. She knew. She knew I had everything I needed to expose her. And in that moment, I could see the realization hit her. The lies, the games, all of it had caught up with her. "Please," she whispered, her voice breaking as she dropped the phone back onto the table. "I didn't mean to hurt you. I never wanted it to be this way." I stood up, my body trembling with a mixture of anger, disbelief, and something deeper I couldn't quite place. I wanted to shout at her, to scream at her for the way she had shattered everything. But I didn't. I just stared at her, watched her crumble, watched her try to patch up the pieces of her broken world, trying so desperately to fix what was already beyond repair. She looked at me, tears streaming down her face. But I didn't feel sorry for her anymore. I didn't know who she was anymore. The woman I loved was gone, replaced by someone who could look me in the eye, lie to my face, and then try to erase the proof of her lies. It wasn't just the affair that tore us apart. It was the betrayal, the deceit, the complete disregard for everything we had built together. The trust was gone, and there was no coming back from that. She had tried to cover it all up, but she had underestimated me. And now, there was nothing left to say. Now here I am, sitting here, trying to make sense of everything that's happened. The pieces of my life, my trust, my marriage, shattered, scattered all around me. It's like waking up from a nightmare, but it's not a dream. It's real. And as much as I wish I could go back, fix things, somehow turn back time, I know that's not possible. The truth came out. And once it's out, there's no going back. It's like a wound that's been ripped open, and no matter how hard you try to stitch it up, the damage has already been done. I keep thinking about the moments we had together, the good ones, the late-night conversations, the laughter, the little inside jokes we shared that no one else would understand. I thought we were building something special, something strong, but it was all a lie. The person I trusted the most in this world, the person I thought I could depend on no matter what, was living in a world of her own. A world where I didn't exist the way I thought I did. And that realization, sitting here in front of this camera, telling you this, still hurts more than I could have ever prepared for. I remember the days when I used to think that love could fix everything. That trust was something unbreakable, that once it was there, it would never fall apart. I used to believe that the bond between two people was something that couldn't be destroyed. But now I know that's not true. Trust, once broken, is impossible to repair completely. The cracks will always be there, even if you try to fill them. She begged me to forgive her. She said it was a mistake, as if that could make it better, as if a few words could undo the pain, the lies, the betrayal. But forgiveness, it's a complicated thing, isn't it? It's not just about saying, I forgive you. It's about feeling it. And right now, I don't know if I can. How do you forgive someone who has ripped your life apart? Someone who stood beside you, looked you in the eyes, and lied to your face? How do you go back to the person you thought you knew when everything about them has changed? I keep asking myself, how could I have missed the signs? How could I have been so blind? But the truth is, I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe in the life we had built. It's easy to ignore the red flags when you don't want to see them. It's easier to live in denial than to face the truth. But once you see it, once the truth hits you full force, there's no going back. And that's the hardest part. The hardest part isn't knowing she betrayed me. It's knowing that I'll never look at the world the same way again. I'll never trust the same way. I'll never be able to believe in the same way. There's a part of me that will always wonder if the people I care about are hiding something from me. There's a part of me that will never feel the same sense of security again. And that is the real cost of betrayal. I guess if there's one thing I've learned through all of this, it's that sometimes the truth is more painful than you can ever imagine. And once it's out, once the mask has been pulled away, there's no putting it back on. You can't unsee what you've seen. You can't unknow what you know. And you can't erase the scar that's left behind. People like to say that time heals all wounds, that you'll eventually move on, that things get easier with time. But I don't know if that's true. I don't know if I'll ever be the same. Maybe I will. Maybe I'll learn to trust again. But right now, in this moment, everything feels broken. Every piece of my life, every piece of my heart, feels shattered beyond repair. And maybe that's the hardest part, to accept that you can't fix everything. Some things just can't be mended, no matter how hard you try. But here I am, picking up the pieces, not because I think I can fix them, but because I have no other choice. I'm left with two options. Keep living in the past, keep replaying everything over and over again in my head, or let go, face the pain, and try to move forward. And I guess, for now, that's what I'm doing, moving forward one step at a time, even though I don't know what that future looks like. I don't know if I'll ever trust again, but I do know this. I'll never forget this lesson. The truth is always more painful than you think, and once it's out, there's no going back.